Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? We'll talk to a guy tonight making that question more pertinent. 7 p.m. on the Pacific Coast. Is that right? 10 p.m. on the Eastern Coast, the Atlantic Coast, some people call it, but I call it the Eastern Coast because, must be time for Mission Log Live. Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Ray.
And hi, I'm John Champion. That's right. We're back again, your Star Trek pals, here to talk to you, our Star Trek pals, about something sort of Star Trek. Oh, sure. Our guest, Jules Urbach, has been friends with Rod a long time. And sure, he's a huge Trek fan. And sure, he interviewed Gene, but he's going to take us into the future. How about a holodeck? Might not be 300 years in the future. Oh, no, maybe 50? Well, we'll find out when Jules teaches us about what he's been working on.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question? You say he interviewed Gene. Gene?
Oh, that was Gene. I'm going to go with Roddenberry.
Oh, okay.
Roddenberry.
Well,
yes.
Well, that makes this quite pertinent then, doesn't it?
It does.
It's
yes.
Also apparently the word of the day. I didn't realize, but I've used it twice now. So only 8 more times this show and it's mine. Hey, everybody, we would love it if you were part of this conversation. Do me a favor, if you would, click the Zoom meeting link or use the one tap from your smartphone, or you can give us a call. 669-900-6833 is the phone number to call. 669-900-6833. Then enter the meeting code on the screen or in the description. We're here to facilitate interesting conversation with interesting people. And while John and I could talk about this stuff all day and probably have a time or two, it'd be so great if you called in with your questions as well. So do all that stuff like I was talking about. If you're joining us live on Facebook, fantastic. If you're joining us live on YouTube, that's great. If you're picking up the audio-only version of this show later, hey, that's fantastic too. The one thing I'm going to ask of everybody, though, please, however you're finding this show, hit like and hit share, and that way more people can know what we're doing here, and then more people will be here, and so much more fun will be had at that point.
Yeah, well, speaking of all those people joining us, specifically now, people who are joining us now are saying hi as they do. There's Scott, there's Pam, there's Paul. Paul says, hi, Ken and Ray and John. Thank you, Paul. There's Scott Mays. There's Evan. Evan says, hi, John and Ken and Jules. Go Star Trek holodeck. Thank you, Evan. There's Chris, there's Carlos, there's Joyce, there's Peter, there's Rick, and there's Casey. And Casey's saying, where is John Cooley? So Cooley, wherever you are, join us, all right? There's Steve, and he's actually shouting out to Earl. He says, nice graphics, Earl. And then, everybody else chiming in. So continue to chat with us here on Facebook. Send us your messages, your questions, and of course, call in or click the Zoom link to join us live.
Hey, coming up, we got Jules in a couple of minutes, but this is the part of the show where we tell you other stuff that's coming up. Other things going on, either stuff that we're doing, and we're not doing a darn thing, I tell you. But somebody else on the Roddenberry Podcast Network is Dr. Trek. Larry Nemeczek is on tour. Can you imagine? If you're in Michigan, you can go to the Dearborn Heights Library. Now, you can do that anytime you're in Michigan, but really you want to do that this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. For a talk entitled Gene Roddenberry, 1969 and 2019. That is based on the documents uncovered by the Trek Files podcast. This is a free presentation, and if it hasn't been made clear, it is a presentation being made by Dr. Trek himself, Larry Nemeczek. You can get more details on the event page at larrynemeczek.com. And yes, it is spelled like it sounds.
Just like it sounds, yes. Hey, every week, like to ask you a poll question unless we forget. And then we'd like to ask you a poll question. So last week, of course, one thing that we didn't talk about was how Star Trek the Motion Picture was back in theaters. It was out Sunday. I think there were 2 showings. And then Wednesday, that's tomorrow. I want to say just one more showing of Fathom Events. Sadly, I will miss it. I love to see the big screen. I know.
Dude.
Well, you can tell me, yeah, it was amazing, right?
Go ahead and let's do the poll question, but yeah, let's
okay.
Back
all right. So inspired by that and inspired by our guest, Max Cervantes, last week, we asked you communicator or communicator, TOS style handheld, the little flippy device. 88% of you prefer that one. TMP style wrist communicator. Only 12% of you showing love to that one. I'm a little surprised, but it's okay. It's okay. We love them both, but it was a hard decision.
big and clunky and dumb looking in the motion picture. Honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
if they had something that looked as cool as honestly, if they had something that looked as cool as the Dick Tracy wrist radio, or something that looks as cool as an Apple Watch, maybe people would have been more on board. Maybe if you had a button where you just push it and then like the top flips up, and that's a good place to keep a picture of your special lady friend and maybe a pinch of snuff, and then all the other stuff you would
Wow.
want to have.
Ken Ray coming to us live from 1943. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Hey, we do have a poll question for this week. I was going to say in honor of our guest, Jules, but really just sort of, I would say pertinent to his visit. How do you like your reality? Augmented or virtual? Your two questions are AR or VR. Augmented reality is losing big time right now, 17%. Virtual reality, 83%. See, I was figuring a different question, and we'll probably hit Jules with this in a moment. I was more wondering which one is going to play a bigger part in our lives. Like, which one do you think? You're a betting man.
Yeah.
You go to Vegas, you're throwing $50 on one. Is it going to be AR or VR? But which one you like more?
Yeah, I think it partly depends on the time frame and the accessibility. Like for me, I voted for augmented because right now I love the idea of, picking up my phone and just doing something quick and easy that's beneficial to what I'm doing right now. Like, I want to see that art or that furniture or directions or something like that. Whereas I think about VR as the thing that takes a little more time investment. I'm in the office, I got to put the thing on my head and then just get completely lost and disoriented for 4 hours. So, it's a different experience.
Start knocking stuff off shelves almost like,
every single time. Yes.
All right. So these are going to be great questions for Jules in just a moment, but I got to say really quickly. I'm really bummed that you're not going to make it to the motion picture. In fact, I would encourage you just to not do whatever it is you're planning to do tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I saw it the day it came out, I think, when I was 9. And this was not like one of those, like, I got to see that because it's coming out. It was more like my mom and I had an afternoon. And so she took me to this movie that she knew was going to be big. But neither of us are really, huge Star Trek fans. And I got to figure I was bored out of my skull. I'm willing to bet as a 9-year-old, this would have been an incredibly boring film for me. And then, I've watched it a few times or several times since then, and I love it. There's so much about that movie that's fantastic. But seeing it on the big screen was so incredibly different. There were 2 or 3 times that I actually teared up, including, and you're not going to believe this, that 15.5-minute flyby around the Enterprise.
As you should tear up during that scene. Yes.
And here's the thing. I think part of the reason is because you and I now are so far away from the original series, right? Because it was like 4 years ago, I guess, that we wrapped that up. 5 years ago, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been a few days. And when you and I were watching the motion picture for our recaps, we had just finished the original series. I want to say maybe 3 months before that, because we plowed through the animated series. So I had a little bit of that. Oh, there's that place that I lived, when that happened. And the other thing is, even though when you're watching it on TV, you see the teeny tiny little Enterprise flying around, it really becomes much more, it's brought more into focus, if you pardon my use of that term, when you're seeing the teeny tiny little Enterprise on the great big giant screen, and still there's V'ger, not even, you can't get all of V'ger on the screen. That's, masterful bit of filmmaking on that. And then of course, it's just great to see those characters again. So cancel your plans, John Champion, and anybody else.
I guess so. Yeah.
I think you have to. Anybody else who is not sure what you're doing tomorrow night, I know it's a Wednesday. I know it's weird to get out on a Wednesday night, but it's probably going to be another 10 years before you get a chance to see it on the big screen, would be my guess. So, and Fathom did not pay us a thing, although we should get in touch with them in about 9.5 years.
Make that happen,
because I got to figure I just sold at least one ticket.
All right. Well, let's welcome our guest. As we mentioned, joining us tonight is Jules Urbach. Now, Jules is a founder of Otoy. He's the founder of Otoy, a company that is spearheading advanced graphic creation, primarily in entertainment, visual effects, and gaming. What he also does is think big about the future. So sure, we've got things like VR and AR, but what's that going to look like in 20 or 50 years and beyond? And how close are we to a holodeck. As I mentioned before, he's also a friend of Rod Roddenberry's, which means that he was around, as a longtime friend of Rod's. He was around when Gene and Majel were alive in his teenage years, and he even interviewed Gene in the early days of TNG. Now, Jules' company also built the TOS-style bridge that we have in our VR space in Sansar, which you can go check out at sansar.com. So he's starting out as a Trek fan. There's just a lot of Trek to talk about. So, Jules, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you, John. And by the way, I did go on Sunday to see the motion picture on the big screen, and it was amazing. I hadn't seen that on the big screen since I was 5 years old when the movie came out.
Wow.
And it's gorgeous. I mean, I kind of, yeah. And Ken's right. You know, when you see I have a giant 4K TV, and I've seen the 4K remastered version. But you can't appreciate that film unless you see it on the giant screen. And for the same reasons that Ken mentioned, when you see that tiny Enterprise feature, everything, the framing just feels so different. And I don't know what master they used, but it looked beautiful. There's no film grain. But it wasn't like one of those super cleaned up versions either. It looked great. It looked great, and it wasn't the special edition either. It was. I'm trying to figure out what print they used, but it was awesome.
It was the
experience.
Yeah, it was the theatritrical cut, but done in 4K. That's my understanding. So yeah, you missed some of those little things that got added in later, which I definitely.
Or DVD res, yeah.
Yeah. But
I heard a rumor that they're redoing, that they want to do a 4K remaster of the 2001 cut, the director's final cut, and do another Fathom event with it. So maybe it won't be 10 years before we see it again in theaters. But
right.
You never know.
It'll be 10 years before you see this one, though, because now I got to defend my position at this point.
I like this cut. I kind of like it the way it is. It's one of my favorite Star Trek movies. I know it's not everyone's favorite, but it's one of mine.
Well, take us back a little bit, because you said that you saw that movie when you were 5 years old when it came out. So you were you were a Trek fan from way back. Talk to me about that. When did that start for you, and what was your series?
Yeah, well, it was the original series, and I grew up. So I was born in Paris and grew up in France when I was 8. So we moved to LA, where I'm at now, in '82. And my dad was a Star Trek fan. My parents were Star Trek fans. So we watched Star Trek, the original series, in French on television. And when the motion picture came out, they just took me to go see it. And I was young, but I loved it. I remember loving it. I remember asking my mother to translate the subtitles for Spock and the Klingons, and because I couldn't barely read or whatever. So it was something that stuck with me. And then I remember Star Trek 2 came out right before we left France. So I saw that in Europe as well. And of course that was another huge thing. So for me, it's so interesting because the middle of those, original series films sort of came in the middle of our big move from France to LA. And it was a few years after moving to LA, sort of mid, '86 when I met Rod, and then I met Gene and Majel shortly after that, because Rod and I went to the same high school, junior high school, Harvard High School, which became Harvard Westlake.
So you've got all the stories about Rod.
Yeah.
So, but here you were. So you were a Star Trek fan from back then, and here's this kid with the a very interesting last name, Roddenberry. Did you put 2 and 2 together and go, oh wait?
No, it was another friend who's like, his dad created Star Trek. I'm like, who's his dad? I had no idea. I mean, it was, when you're 12 years old, you just sometimes don't piece these things together. And so I actually, Rod and I I think we're in the same drama class at first, and I had no idea. I didn't even know Roddenberry, who that was, but I was a Star Trek fan. I appreciated the show. I didn't know who was behind the scenes doing this stuff, and I quickly learned. I mean, I think that year, once my friend told me that, I was like, oh, that's cool. And I think that same year, '86, the Voyage, Star Trek 4 came out, and then Rod, once he got a clue that I liked Star Trek, started like taking stuff from Gene's office and giving me like the Phase of Star Trek, role-playing game, and all the it was like a ship-based board game or whatever, and all the manuals and everything. He's like, I don't want this. I don't know if you know Rod's backstory, but he was not really into Star Trek when he was like a teenager. It came later that he became truly immersed in it. So it was interesting, and I kind of appreciated everything with the original series. And then one day, this is after, of course, Rod, I think this was after Star Trek 4. He said, oh, my dad's doing a new show called Star Trek: The Next Generation, and it's going to be great. Because I think the thinking was at the time Star Trek 5 was, like coming out, and it was this thing where there was a sort of a reclamation of Star Trek that I think I could sense from Rod's describing what was happening at Pride, that I think he felt reflected his dad's pride in it. And that was interesting to see. And certainly through the eyes of a 13-year-old at the time, that I had no idea how movies were made or anything. I just loved Star Trek and I loved science fiction. And it was fascinating to sort of be exposed in this little drips and drabs to, just how the sausage was made, I guess, but it was better than I could possibly have imagined. And as you alluded to, when I actually ended up interviewing Rod's dad, Gene, for our school newspaper, they made me the editor-in-chief of the newspaper at 13. And, it was meant to be this progressive thing, like do whatever you want with the newspaper. It's student run. I'm like, okay, we're not talking about football or lacrosse. I'm taking 8 pages to interview Gene Roddenberry about Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I think the fall of 87 was when it aired. And so we were, I think, in 8th grade. And I think the interview was not long, after that. And it was amazing. I just asked Rod, like, do you think your dad would answer questions for the newspaper if I asked him these things? And Rod's like, sure. And you saw the interview, you guys have seen it. It's long and voluminous, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was incredible. Like, Gene made an audio tape for this whole thing. So we have his voice, not just the answers to the questions. And so we transcribed it, and I did all the graphics in Adobe Page, it was called Altus PageMaker at the time. And it was glorious. And so that was the late 80s. And that was sort of my, that was kind of how I, at first, I think, really connected with Gene, other than just seeing him in the house when we were kids, playing with Rod. So.
Well, let me go back to something really quickly here. So in your 13-year-old mind, what's worse, the fact that Rod had no idea what Star Trek was, or that he was stealing stuff from his father to give it to you?
Stealing stuff from his dad to give to me was amazing. Like, everyone was happy with it. Rod was like, I don't want it. My dad doesn't know it's there, or doesn't care. It's just sitting in the shelf somewhere. You have it. I'm like, I will take it. And my mother sent me to summer camp to do archery, and all I did was read Star Trek books and didn't play it all with the other. I mean, it was great. I had the best summer ever with all that stuff. So no, I think that Rod, it's not that Rod didn't know Star Trek. It's complicated. I mean, you almost have to, I'm sure when he talks about it, he'll describe why it was something that he just didn't feel connected to. It was something his father did. When your own father's doing something, maybe at the time it's not something you feel as connected to. And I mean, and I started to see, I've known him forever. I've known him for 33 years or something like that. It's I started to see the sort of, especially after Gene died and other shows got made with the Roddenberry name, that's when he started to become really invested in what was being done, including Star Trek and everything else. And so it just sort of was a thaw. And I think there was a lot of reasons why it was, what his parents were doing. He was a rebel, he says, he's open about that. Yeah. And so there was a little bit of rebellion against that. Even, I think you said in interviews, I like Star Wars more, at the time. We're at a Space 1999 lunchbox. But, he did like Star Trek. He knew exactly what it was. And with Next Generation, and I remember I was talking about Star Trek 4, Star Trek 5. These are the movies that came out while we were growing up. And I remember him saying with Star Trek 5, I was like, yeah, my dad doesn't really think it's in continuity or whatever it was. Well, yeah, I don't know if he used those exact words, but it's something like it didn't really happen. And Next Generation is really that's Star Trek for my dad. And so, and of course, Gene died right before Star Trek 6 came out. And I think that Next Generation changed a lot. Rod was very aware of that. He took me to the sets, and I got, and then he introduced me to Gates McFadden and Brent Spiner, and Gates took me to the sets. And it was amazing. So, and he was a gopher on the show. So of course he knew what it was. He was sort of involved in it, but I think his love and passion for what his dad was doing, it just grew, as he grew out of adolescence and into his teenage years, into his 20s. And that was fascinating to watch as well. But that was his journey. And it's sort of amazing to sort of think back to those decades with both Rod and, of course, when Gene passed away, it was 1991. 3 months before that, my dad passed away, and Rod and I were pretty much the same age. We were both 17 when our dads died, and our dads were almost the same age. They're in their 70s. So we had this as a bonding experience. And what was interesting is that Majel, who I had ended up knowing for 20 years almost after that point, she was really the parent that I got to know really, really well. And Gene, unfortunately, just, he passed away when we were all just too young. I didn't really get to spend the same kind of time that I did with Majel. And so a lot of how I've been, other than, of course, my best friend Rod, the Roddenberry family is through Majel, and seeing her over 20 years was also an amazing insight into just, her life in relation to Star Trek. I mean, obviously there was this, she was the carrier of the torch and the legacy of Gene for decades, really. And a lot of the Gene Roddenberry shows like Andromeda and the like that came about, and the others were, which Rod was also involved with, came out of Major's, like, going through Gene stuff and saying, this is something we should do. We should try to keep the legacy going.
Yeah.
It was, there's so many stories. I don't even know where to start or where to.
Well, I want to come back to all of this in just a second. Just a couple of little notes and comments that are coming in. First of all, I do want to let people know that we have that audio interview of the questions that you submitted to Gene. It's about a 12, 13-minute response that he sent to you on tape. We have that digitized, and we're going to do something with it. We'll put it on the site. We'll maybe put it in our VR space so people can go in and listen to it. But it's pretty great. So we will make it available for people to listen to. Another thing, you mentioned Gates showing you around. I don't know if I ever told you, Gates asked about you. Gates came into the studio maybe a year ago, I guess, that we interviewed her or something like that, maybe a little longer. And she asked about you. I was showing her around here, Roddenberry. She was like, "How's Rod?" But then she wanted to know about you. And she was like, "Oh, Jules, brilliant. He's this great guy. He's amazing." Yeah. I was like, there you go. You should give him a call. And then the other thing really quickly here, people are mentioning that you're on the ISS as you do the show. And Chris Riker says, if you miss this episode, Jules will fly really fast counterclockwise around the Earth so you can watch it live. So I know that you would appreciate that. You would definitely get that reference. So
my favorite movie is Superman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
669-900-6833 is the phone number to call. 669-900-6833, or you can use the one tap from your smartphone, or if you're on Facebook, follow the links there, enter the meeting code that's there. You'll get to talk to Earl, and then you'll get to talk to Jules. So I don't want to cut short the Star Trek time, but there's a lot of AR and VR stuff that I want to get to as well. So building a bridge between the two, is it a love of Star Trek that got you into the field that you're in now? Is it a love of sci-fi that got you into that? Or is it like, okay, Star Trek is what I do for fun. What I do for work is this other thing. And I don't even know how the two, interact or intertwine.
Like many people that are in technology or aeronautics or science, I mean, they were inspired by Star Trek. I mean, I definitely, it was in my brain, but my career path and this company that I built, I mean, I can trace it back to 1983. When I first moved to LA, I went to the Santa Monica Pier and I saw this video game called Dragon's Lair. And it was a Laserdisc game. Remember Laserdisc, right? But that came before DVDs, and it played back the cartoon with a joystick, and you could control how the animation played out. And Don Bluth created this stuff. And it was mind blowing to me because it showed, as far as I was concerned, I mean, this was completely, it was hand drawn, of course, but it was animated. It was like a massive computer was sitting here next to Pac-Man with a joystick. You can control it. And immediately my mind thought of like, well, if they could do this, like what would, could you make it so that this thing could be like a hologram? And I'd seen, holographic prints at the Hayden Planetarium in New York, and I was around that age. And so I started to really think about video games and movies and reality all sort of blending together. And I had this deep passion. And I figured video games would be the angle to do that. So I started learning to code, learning to program, and that really is what got me into the space. Now, I will say that when Encountered Farpoint came out, and in 1987 again, and Riker goes into that holodeck, finds data in there, I think, and it's a jungle area. I mean, this thing was like, wow, this thing is truly visualized in a way that I think is experientially what I'm going for, right? And so there is a Star Trek connection there, but a lot of the trajectory of Otoy, the company that I started, was around getting video game technology to render film quality. And we accomplished that. About 10 years ago, we put out a piece of software called Octane Render, and it's now used in Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel and all these movies, the opening of Westworld, opening of Netflix's The Crown. They're all done in our render, and it's nearly instantaneous. So and it follows the laws of physics and light, and it uses video game GPUs, graphics chips that are built for the PlayStation, the Xbox, and PC gamers probably are familiar with NVIDIA and AMD, and it uses that to deliver higher quality graphics than what RenderMan was doing 5 years ago. And that's sort of like simulating the laws of physics and light is something that I always had as a goal going back 25 years, going back to before I graduated high school. So that's the genesis of the company. And there is along the way, though, I mean, it's impossible for me to ignore how things like the holodeck inspired, what I wanted to see happen. And so we're a software company, but the interesting part about our trajectory is we work with a lot of interesting partners that take our software that, okay, well, you guys can now render reality, you can shoot photons and rays around, get back a real image. It's nearly real time. You're using commodity hardware. Let's connect this to VR. And so my first VR story is John Carmack. I don't know if you guys are familiar with who he is. He created Doom and Quake, super well known in the video game space, and he is the CTO of Facebook's Oculus company. And so we partnered with him 5 years ago. In fact, the Star Trek bridge that's in Sandstar was originally for them, for Facebook and Oculus, and we built a whole pipeline to deliver these experiences that you could see in the limited way inside of VR. And that was our first partnership. We worked with other glasses vendors along the way, but one of the interesting partners that came along a couple of years back, that's now public cooperation, and Roddenberry is involved in this, is a company called Lightfield Lab. And they're building, the three guys out of up north in Santa Clara, California, and they're building these super high density displays. So your iPhone is maybe 400 pixels in an inch. Their displays are 4,000. So every single pixel in an iPhone has 100 subpixels that spray all these rays out. And their technology at this density allows you to generate a white light emissive hologram. So things can be above the surface or below it. And the bigger the surface of the display, and these displays are almost like tiles, you can connect them together to fill any size room you want or any size surface. You have the actual hardware display optics for a true holodeck. And this is not 50 years away. They just got $28 million a month ago from Verizon, from Comcast, Samsung, which is critically important. They're building these things, and these things are going to be in the 2021 range in terms of theme parks, concerts, and yes, eventually your home theater. And our partnership involves creating all of our tools, all of the software to make sure that you can render, it's about a billion pixels per square foot. So it's about 32K. If you're looking at 4K TVs, this is 32K for something that's the size of an iPad. And you're dealing with orders of magnitude greater pixels to stream and to render, but it's all doable. And thankfully, computers and chips keep getting faster and smaller and better, and we have cloud computing. So there are ways of doing it. So the holodeck is a 2020s thing. It'll be insanely expensive to fill an entire room floor to ceiling, but the panels can link, they can be curved. You can actually do something better than the Star Trek holodeck. You can make it so that you can actually have it so that the movie theaters, where you go behind the back wall of the theater to go out the door so the light doesn't leak in. You can have a wall in front of the door that's holographic, so you don't even see the person walking in and out. It's crazy. It's the kind of stuff that you actually start to build these things in real. You're like, maybe the Star Trek, maybe in Star Trek it's not, because it's the thing is with Star Trek there's an amazing thing where, okay, we're not really close to the spaceships side of things, or sort of the macro, advancements. In fact, some people say we've gone slower, where are the supersonic jets, but in terms of computing, I mean, wow, it doesn't take more than 10 years for what's supposed to be in the 23rd and 24th century to become reality. Picard's iPads that were in the 90s. I mean, Steve Jobs introduced the iPad in 2010. It took 15, 16 years. And and of course it's even worse for the original series, where you have no graphics, no nothing, and even on the the movies where they showed these vector graphics on the Enterprise bridge, and you realize everything is now touchscreen, there's no real limitations for what you could display, and it's the same sort of thing with the holodeck. Holographic displays seem like they're far out because people are thinking, oh, it's going to take lasers and all these things. No, it just took the cell phone revolution to get really small screens, and Sony to sort of shrink things even further for viewfinders and camcorders, and then all of a sudden you have the pieces for these 4,000 dpi density panels. It takes a little bit of venture capital to fund these things, but you now have all the major pieces needed for this to happen, and it's just a question of cost. So my projection is the 2020s will be where these things become a lot like very high-end home theater displays were in the beginning. Those things were hundreds of thousands of dollars more if you really went crazy with that. After, of course, theaters were millions of dollars to build, or hundreds of that. So it's going to follow that curve, and I think that you'll start to see 100-inch holographic TVs that'll be in the 6 figures. They'll get good at the 10 figures. They'll be 5 figures, and they'll be hundreds of dollars. But the more interesting options are going to be holographic tables. And of course, at some point in about 10 or 15 years time, this will be as cheap as wallpaper. I mean, or as, or the equivalent, of what you could take from cheap, LED, video panels and stitch them together. So there's definitely within our, near lifetimes, this is going to be something we'll be dealing with, and it's fascinating. And it's not even the craziest thing coming down the pipeline, but it's been a dream of mine to sort of see this hardware happen. And it's, by the way, a lot of people ask, well, how does touch work? So the short answer is it doesn't right now. It'll just be visual holograms, which will still look insanely real. I've seen the prototype panel is 6 by 4 inches. We're actually going up there again this week to test motion and interactive stuff on there. And it projects in and out about 2 inches. The bigger the panels, the further out it projects. But they are working on touch. Life Lab is working on touch, and they're using ultrasonics to create, it's like sound waves that you can use to sort of pinpoint something in space and create a point that has some sort of sort of feedback on it. And it doesn't give you perfect touch, but it gives you the ability to push objects, to feel the surfaces as you project the visual versions of them and push on them. And that's going to be the interface for these things. How that gets to, sub-nanometer touch on your fingertips is, that's probably decades out, but I think it's going to be pretty great, right, pretty much right around the third generation, a few years out from now. So that's it in the summary.
Yeah. Let me really quickly, because I know you said that's it in the summary, but I've got a few other questions as well. But we have like 3 other things that we have to do first. The first one of those things is to remind people how to get in touch with us. 669-900-6833 is the phone number to call. 669-900-6833, or you can use the one tap from your smartphone, or if you're on Facebook, click the links there, follow the instructions, and we'll get you on. We're going to do that in just a moment. We have a caller holding. Camel, hang tight. We'll be right with you. John, though, it is the bottom of the hour, and you had an announcement that you wanted to make.
Yeah, I'll make this really short and sweet. Everybody who's in the chat right now, who, as you often do every week, say hi to Scott Palm. You know that we've been doing the fundraiser for Scott for the Heroic Curriculum, part of the Pop Culture Hero Coalition. Well, here's the update. Thank you, everybody who contributed. We blew past our goal by more than $500, thanks to all of you. I wanted to share just a couple of the most recent comments. I loved Shani Schwartz said, I donated because the anti-bullying curriculum gets me right in my Trekkie soul. And then Brian Hart said, what a great cause. Good luck, Scott. So I've been in touch with both Scott and Chase, and we're all working to, now that the fundraiser is wrapped up, we're leaving the page up there, even though donations will be turned off. But I'm leaving the page there, and we'll also connect it back to our social media, because now the work begins. After the Roddenberry Foundation writes that check and we get Scott set up, he will be able to take his curriculum into schools. And we're talking about making sure we get back to you photos and video of everything that's happening, so you can see Scott at work putting this amazing program into place. So that's it. I mean, the work is not over, but thank you all for helping us on this phase of the fundraiser. It was absolutely an honor to work with Scott and Chase and see all the incredible comments come in from everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope that we get to do this or something like this again. And let's all wish Scott the absolute best of luck going forth and getting this curriculum out to the kids who need it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Watch our social media, and we'll link back to that page when we start putting up content from Scott's work.
It is ridiculously touching.
Yeah,
I mean, it's thank you. And it's not for us. It's not for anything that we're doing. It's for Scott, and it's for making like we said in the write-up that we did every week. It's for making the world better. And everybody who shared that, everybody who donated anything, you did that. And I'm floored when I think about it. And so I try not to very often, because, I got to get up on the floor and do what we're doing. Our guest tonight is Jules Urbach. I've got questions, but so does Camel. Camel has been very patient. He's been waiting. Camel, how's it going this evening?
Good. Good evening, John, Ken, and Jules. I know we're pressed for time. I will make it quick. One of my biggest things that I've been concerned about since this episode of A Ship in the Bottle, where Moriarty is trapped in the holodeck in a little cube on Data's desk, and he goes, There's plenty of episodes in there. He'll think he's traveling around the galaxy for the rest of his life. What do you guys and all Trekkers, do you think that wasn't inspiration for the movie The Matrix? And now continuing today, everybody thinks we're in a holodeck and everything's fake. It's very upsetting. What's your take, gentlemen?
Well, I've heard that The Matrix, they might be giants saying about it, in the allegory of the people in the cave. You know the one I'm talking about. Yeah, the allegory, but they might be giants had it as
Plato's
well.
Cave?
Sure, if you say so. I mean, I've heard that was actually the basis for the Matrix. I mean, if you've got the thing where people are afraid to look outside because of all the shadows, and then once they look outside, they realize it's just stuff that they can actually move past or conquer or whatever, and then of course they end up killing the guy who says no, it's really just stuff. Don't worry about it. But yeah, what you're talking about is kind of scary to me. Jules.
I'm not scared by it at all. I mean, first of all, it's interesting because I think the idea, it's called the simulation theory. It's been around, I think, for a while. It's becoming, so I'll sort of describe the theory itself, which is that if you're able to prove that you have the technology to put somebody into a simulation like the holodeck that looks so real that or the Matrix, that you have no idea, you can't really have an idea whether or not it's real reality or fake reality, then the chances are that statistically speaking, we're not in real reality. It's in a simulated reality. So that's the premise. It doesn't mean I completely agree with it or think it's absolutely the case. But then, it's sort of one of these things where is it falsifiable? In other words, can you prove that does it even matter? Because I mean, ultimately, we live, we have a history to this world. We don't get put in, as far as we know, we don't get put into different universes every day. The universe has worked more or less the same for billions of years, and it appears like it will. And there's so the question is, what's the point of the simulation? Elon Musk, I think when he posited this, that's where it got a lot of attention, more so even in the Matrix movies, where he's like, well, I think because video games are getting so good, you can imagine 10,000 years, it'll prove this theory correct. And I think that there's a lot of, it's an insane amount of computing power to simulate an entire universe. So there's lots and lots of thinking that's saying, well, if our brains were like in the Matrix and all we had to do is simulate the things around us, that might explain with quantum effects why we're only able to measure certain things, and looking at things affects things. But it's hard to say. And I do think that the concept of the Russian dolls thing of realities within realities is intriguing and interesting. But I think it's a philosophical question. It comes down to, I work with, you have advisors to the company like Lisa Randall, who's a renowned physicist, and I think is working on like space membrane 5-dimensional theories. And I asked her, like, what happens below the Planck constant? Like, she says it's a philosophical question. If we can't prove and know how reality works, it's very difficult, even if we can theorize the fact that yes, we can simulate reality, to know for sure how that happens. And just because we can visually simulate it and make it feel real doesn't mean that we've solved everything that the laws of physics allow us to do in our reality. So, there's been some like back of the envelope calculations about what it would take to simulate the universe at a universal scale, and it's crazy. Like, there's no known process that would make that really easy. So it's put it this way, it's not something that keeps me up at night, but it's something I think about a lot. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't something deeper going on with reality that we don't understand. There could be other layers to it. I mean, maybe it's like information theory based, right? Which means that there is no computer, but there is some sort of process that simulates it that we just don't see. We don't even fully understand the 4 dimensions of space and time that we have in our hands. We can't connect gravity to quantum mechanics. There's so many things that we are like, we should figure out first before we really start to put a stake in the ground and say, I think it's a shame about the simulated reality. We just don't know enough. However, I will say that I am optimistic that you will be able to create a simulated reality, even if it's not as quiescent as this one that we are in, assuming this is base reality, that will look and feel completely real. Like, it may not happen in completely, with all our senses being completely taken over like the Matrix in 10 years, but it's not an impossible thing to imagine, in the next century. It's just, we already have the basis for computing that. I mean, if you're talking about simulating reality for just each brain that's on planet Earth, not impossible, expensive, but not impossible. And it's something that might affect everything that we do going forward. I mean, you're one Star Trek, innovation away from changing the entire way this thing works for space exploration, right? If you can, plug your brain into the internet, into virtual reality, into whatever you want to call it, like the Matrix, and you have subspace, right? And you have astral light travel, then why send ships out there? Why risk red shirts, getting killed every week when you could just send probes that are microscopic and don't disturb, don't violate the Prime Directive, look at all the planets out there, do whatever you want, but your brains over, faster than light travel would be connected to these things. And if you don't have faster than light travel, then at least build probes that can model that and allow us to sort of like live that or explore that safely on Earth. And barring that, and this is the most likely, reason why, we haven't seen aliens or maybe how aliens really work, send probes that are AI based that can do all the work for us and then tell us what it's all about, and act as proxies for us, and still be things that don't disturb natural habitats of other planets and the like. So it's interesting to consider those options, because to me, it feels like long before you get warp speed on the Enterprise. And of course, there's something magical. I mean, we as humans, it's why Star Trek is a passion for us. So we want to walk on other planets. Like, it's not enough to just virtually go there. But from a practical perspective, once you have the ability to sort of teleport yourself through a virtual body, you just don't need a spaceship. I mean, it's just going to be simpler to send tiny, self-assembling molecules all over the galaxy and have that sort of spread humanity if you can. So there's a lot of value to the idea of simulations that we can live in and experience in it. Of course, there's just a lot of, misery and poverty and famine and things that are just not great in the world that, one argument, and it's not necessarily the only one or the right one, but the one argument is if you give people the equivalent of the holodeck or something to plug into, or let's say, the one room in everyone's home is a holographic experience that you can touch. I mean, it does sort of allow them to experience life, without sort of any limits, the way that phones and the internet has done for information today, where information is just pervasive. I mean, you couldn't get this thing with all the money in the world, 60 years ago. Now everyone in the world with a smartphone has access to everything. That could happen for material goods with 3D printing, with medicine for 3D printing, if we can solve the energy problem. So things like, replication and VR and holographic experiences, those kinds of things can improve our lives, give people access to places they couldn't go or lectures they couldn't be at. And ultimately, when, if we're able to really make a dent traveling through space, and there is anything that can be done with faster light travel, like subspace, radio or transmissions, then it's really clear that you would probably want us to have, pro-based, VR sort of entities sort of exploring those other worlds through us as proxies. And I think that's one of the things that I think about a lot when I think about the future.
So many minds right now.
Thank you, Jules.
Being blown in the chat. Thank you, Camel, for calling in. Anything else on your mind tonight? Or is that enough to
Pardon me? No, there's not much time, guys. I'm going to get off the phone and get East back to work.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great night.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
Guys.
Let me ask you a question really quickly, Jules. And it's not going to be a really quick question. I'm just kidding. I wanted to say it would be really quick so I can get in there. So the first time I heard about virtual reality, and people have heard who've watched the show, I think have heard this before. The first time I heard about virtual reality was January of 1990, when Jaron Lanier came and spoke to the university where I was attending. And what was really exciting was, I mean, we left there knowing that in 5 years we were all going to have this technology, right? And then what we got instead was the Nintendo Power Glove and Lawnmower Man, and nothing really that was anything like that. Fast forward a little bit, because John mentioned, we talked about in the poll question about augmented reality. What we got instead was Google Glass. And it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but it's not exactly what the promise is either.
It's not good. I'll be blunt, it's pretty bad.
I never tried
Sorry,
it,
Google.
but I never got to use it, but it seemed like it was kind of horrible. I mean, witness the fact that we don't have it anymore. It's now the butt of a joke. See also the Nintendo Power Glove and Lawnmower Man. So here are the questions that I have. Like when John says what he wants to do is like be able to pick up his phone and point it at that, and that's AR. That to me is precursor to something. We keep hearing rumors about Apple or somebody else getting into augmented reality glasses, and that, it seems to me, has to be the real way for it to go. But there are any number of ways that from a consumer side, we could trip and fall. There could be Lawnmower Man 3, for example, or there could be Google Glass 2. I guess what I'm wondering is there a way to get over that hurdle with consumers, or the level you're talking about, it almost sounds like it doesn't even matter about consumers, because this technology is happening and people can wait for it excitedly, or people can get out of the way? Or does this have to be something comes along that really gets John and Jane Q on board so that we can actually start to see this stuff really move?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to answer your point about AR, VR, I mean, when I talk about holographic displays, I'm talking about years and decades out. Like we have glasses today, and the second VR revolution started in 2012 with Oculus. They eventually got bought by Facebook. That's one of the reasons why this is not going away. I mean, you have Facebook and you have rumored Apple, right, and Google. By the way, when Apple I think puts out their glasses, if they do, and it's like the Apple Watch, it'll probably be like a pair of sunglasses, I'm assuming, and then you'll see people really adopt it. And that's even what Oculus's mission was. Like the Gear VR, I think, was their best-selling device. That was one that connected the Samsung phone. So your phone turned into a VR display. Carmack made it beautiful. It's one of the reasons why we invested so much time making it work. PCVR has not taken off. It's not done great, but mobile VR maybe. But even I think the Gear VR maxed out at 10 million units. That's not a lot. I mean, PlayStation's 100 million. The phones are in hundreds of millions, right? So that's not exactly mass adoption. And the reason for that is the glasses are heavy. I wore ODG, which is a company that is now out of business, sadly. They made the smallest glasses, AR VR glasses I'd ever seen. They were 4 ounces, and I couldn't wear those things for more than 2 hours before it started to get uncomfortable. You have to make those glasses really, really lightweight. I mean, look at consumers not wanting to put on 3D glasses at home in front of their TVs. And those things are just lightweight polarized glasses. That's nothing. So if you have any sort of friction on your face, that's a barrier to consumer adoption, unless the experience is truly magical, in which case people might put that on for a couple of hours, but not for 8 hours, not the same amount of time they spend looking at their phones or their TVs or even, certainly walking outdoors. And so that's where there's this issue that it really does need to be super comfortable. And I also would say that the VR AR discussion of which things are better. I mean, even Facebook acknowledges that their glasses are eventually going to be AR glasses that have a blackout button that turns into VR. That's the only way these things work. There's not going to be 2 different types of glasses. You're going to have, it's not going to be beta and VHS. It's going to be AR, VR in one device. If you're going to have a pair of glasses, that's clearly where things are headed. And I think that, Mike Abrash, who's their chief science officer, head of Facebook Reality Labs, he's talked about that as part of the roadmap for the 2020s. So they will do it. I suspect that I've seen glasses that actually have like this, the LCD thing where you can hit a button, smokes up, it's totally opaque, goes to transparent. So you can have both. And ultimately, AR is probably harder because you really have to do a lot of work to mix what you're seeing through the glasses with the reality, and really kind of sync that together. If you don't do that right, it's hard. And no one's yet really pulled that off. Magic Leap, which is a company that's raised billions of dollars, I know those people that work there, and they're doing good stuff, but it's tough. Those early glasses are like really, they're early prototypes from my perspective. But we'll see. I mean, when Apple gets into the space, that's when you'll know that there's a real consumer hockey puck thing about to happen. And I think that what they're working on potentially might be along the lines of what I think Google's next. Just because Google Glass fell doesn't mean Google stopped working on that. I mean, they've had Daydream, which Google Cardboard before that, and so they're not done. But the glasses space is tough. I mean, it might take about 5 years for those glasses to get to sunglass form factor, and by then you might have holographic displays. So there's going to be a point where those things coexist, because going outside, if you want to have an AR experience, that you're not going to have buildings coated with holographic panels probably for many decades to come. By the way, when you do, buildings can be turned invisible. They can be turned into jungles. It's going to change the way cities look, by the way. It's wild. Same thing with clothing. Same thing with holographic masks, which, if you guys saw years and years on HBO, sorry, I think it was HBO, first episode showed a girl with a transparent mask, and she was having emojis superimposed in her face. It was supposed to take place in the future by 10 years. And that kind of stuff is going to be interesting. But I think, yeah, the glasses, AR glasses, and AR, certainly AR on the phones is cool. Like, we're doing stuff around that as well. It's nice, it's convenient, it's easy, people know how to use it. But that's, to me, not true AR. That is not like your eyeballs are seeing something all the time overlaid on reality. That's tougher. That's maybe in the middle of this decade, or we'll see. Maybe we'll be surprised and we'll see something from one of these guys that really nails that in 3 years. But I don't think it's a this year or next year thing.
669-900-6833 is the phone number to call, 669-900-6833, or you can use the one tap from your smartphone, or if you're on Facebook, follow all the Facebook rules, because they're a tremendous amount of fun. Craig is on the line, and we're going to get to Craig in just a moment. I want to really quickly remind people about the other stuff that they can find on the Roddenberry Podcast Network. That, of course, being a network of podcasts produced either by or in cooperation with Roddenberry Entertainment. You've got, Women at Warp. You've got the Trek Files. You've got Priority One, Daily Star Trek News. Actually, Daily Star Trek News had another really good commentary on Monday's show, I think, about the motion picture as well. So lots of love for that going on. Of course, Shabam is out there, and I feel certain I've missed 2 shows. I think those 2 shows are Mission Log and Mission Log Live, but you probably know about those.
Oh, I like those. Those are great.
They're not bad. Not bad.
Yeah.
The place to find them all, podcasts.roddenberry.com, or if you're in a hurry, podcast.roddenberry.com. Either one of those will work. So check them all out, won't you? Craig is on the line. Good evening, Craig.
Good evening, gentlemen. Hello, John, Ken, Jules.
Hello.
I was
Craig.
16 years old. Hi, I was 16 years old when the Star Trek motion picture came out. And John, you've got to see it. Hey, Jules, what you're saying, it's really exciting. I'm blown away by these concepts. And I don't know if anybody knows. I don't know if it's out or not, but it's a wrap on the Picard show. They did a wrap, and a friend of mine does the contact lenses for all the aliens on the show and for Star Wars. And everyone involved in the production received this beautiful coin. It's just awesome. Of course, she won't give it up. But I'm looking. You were talking about Major.
Something that'll get stolen off of somebody's desk eventually and handed to some. That's really what we can learn from tonight. Yes.
Major, you mentioned Major. I really look forward to meeting her at the convention every year, and yeah, I really do miss her. I remember one time she picked me out, and she only picked 20 of us to see a birthday party scene that they filmed for her son in the show for Wesley, and it was awesome. And she was just so friendly and so nice. I really missed her.
How cool!
But, she was an amazing woman.
Yeah. Anyway, I had to just say that, and it's just fascinating listening to what you have to say. Have a great evening, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig.
So come back, if you would, to, see, I'm interested in the consumer space because I'm interested in the consumer space. I guess what I'm wondering, though, the kinds of things you're working on now, are these going to be more like, are you saying this like for business applications? I mean, the idea of it being a way to actually, explore outer space is fascinating as well. I mean, is it going to be a free and breakfast cereal thing? I mean, what is the thing? Is it going to be business applications? Is it going to be medical applications? Is there going to be a thing that's going to drive this, or is it just, I don't want to go so far as to say something like a singularity, but like that kind of thing?
Well, as a business, as we are today, and we sell Octane in our software and our services, we also have a whole cloud thing going on, which is using blockchain. All stuff. I mean, there's a lot of services that can be built on top of this kind of technology. And I think, to be honest, a lot of the use today for AR and VR is in industry. Sort of architecture, visualization, location-based entertainment. Like the Void's doing great stuff, and those are the things that can kind of sustain this industry in its current form. Now, the reason why Oculus existed was to bring VR to gaming, right? And gaming and entertainment and films and narratives that are done in this thing. I mean, that's sort of the next layer, and that is something that being entertainment is a multi $100 billion plus dollar business if you combine all these things together. So if you just assume that the future, forgetting VR and AR and mixed reality, say it's volumetric, whether it's holographic or anything else, if everything is sort of displayed in a way that is not on a 2D flat screen, then you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of content that's being pushed to that. And so you look at things like Fortnite, and we have a very close relationship with Tim Sweeney at Epic. I actually showed him those ODG glasses, the 4-ounce ones. He was, it was like his favorite thing. I mean, there is definitely going to be all the media, all the entertainment we consume, all the shows we watch, all of the experiences that we kind of consume through phones and screens today will have some sort of iteration in VR and AR and holographic. Whichever one gets there first and does it right and is frictionless is, it's going to deliver that. And you will at that point rethink everything. It's happened before. We've seen now things happen much faster, right? I mean, it didn't take more than 10 years for the iPhone to completely upend, the desktop, and the web upended, desktops without the web before that. I mean, it's like you've seen this thing every 10 years. So everyone's making the bet that which is why you're seeing huge companies like Facebook and Google spending billions. Rumored Apple, Apple's been the same, right? And Microsoft is as well. With the HoloLens. I mean, the world's largest companies that are trillion-dollar companies each, right, are putting this kind of effort in there, because there is going to be, an entire ecosystem of content and experiences that are analogous to the size of what we can do digitally today, that works. And I think that Microsoft is smartly focusing HoloLens on industrial uses. I mean, there was some controversy, I think, because they did some stuff for the military, but ultimately, in a factory work floor, AR glasses actually could be really useful. And it's not like, even if it's, expensive and a little bulky, it's better than nothing. And in those cases, that's fascinating. Consumers, again, it's not going to work until it really gets small and lightweight and you can wear it as easily as a pair of sunglasses. And everyone knows that. Everyone sort of said that that's the landing on the moon. That's the goal. That's the Apollo 11 of this thing. And when you hit that, it'll be big. But that is going to happen from my perspective, around the same time you're going to start to see holographic panels where no glasses will be necessary. Everyone without any glasses will be able to see these virtual experiences just like you can in the holodeck. And they'll compete, but ultimately from my perspective is, with the things we're doing, we're just going to plug into each of those. They'll have different challenges, but they're going to coexist. But I do think that ultimately, if you don't have to wear anything on your face, that's going to be the larger surface area of experience for people.
Does any part of you worry that it's all going to be passive? I mean, that it's going to be like television where it's like, oh, here's this miracle. I'm just going to sit here and watch this until I'm 80 now.
Well, it might be passive. It might be a lot like social. No, I think one of the things that's going to be truly interactive is you look at FaceTime or Skype calls. I mean, when you have a holographic, and so I actually stopped short of where the roadmap for these holographic panels, is at. So you have the visuals in the first generation, which is being worked on now. Out 2020, 2021, then touch through the ultrasonic haptic interface. The third iteration is bidirectional. So and this is the part where we actually do have a whole suite of hardware technology that we're working on with Lightfield Lab that captures digital doubles, it captures holographically. We've had this as a service for decades. We won 2 Academy Awards for scanning all the Avengers, all the superheroes on the DC TV shows, like they're all scanned in on light stage. We put that on the back of every panel, and you actually have a two-way mirror where you and I, instead of talking and seeing you on a flat screen, it looks like I'm really talking to you. Imagine that kind of level of interaction in reality between two people or between a meeting of people. And that's, I think, going to be very interactive and very emotionally gripping for people. And certainly it's going to save a ton on, you don't have to take your Tesla. If you're worried about the environment, you don't have to drive to work because you can actually have all the trillion rays of light per square foot that you would see looking at somebody across the table are fully captured and represented in front of you. It's not going to, other than shaking somebody's hand, it's like you can have meetings, you can go to places and be in places where it's completely natural. And in that sense, you can imagine a lot of more mundane interactive things, but still very important interactive things. I mean, people still talk and communicate over these devices. And if you can make that much more human-like, it's going to be compelling. So I think there's going to be that. And I think the games prove that, people are absolutely willing to immerse themselves in crazy stuff. I mean, you don't have internet cafes the way that you did it back in the day. But I mean, when, I think there was a point where people would die in China from, exhaustion from playing these things. So you get people, completely immersed in Fortnite. I mean, there's no doubt that certainly younger generations are more adept and, sort of immersing themselves in these things. I think there's going to be a mix of things. I think it'll be just like what TVs are used for now or screens are used for now. You see some things are passive, some things are interactive, some things are social, some things are business oriented. And it might just be that same mix, just translated to a whole new medium of experience.
See, and without even knowing it, Jules, you actually answered a question that came into our chat. Sean, who asked, with all the talk about VR, AR, and holodecks, the question Star Trek taught us is how long before it malfunctions and tries to kill us. So we just barely scratched the surface on that. And honestly, I've got like 4 other topics that we could get into that we could just do as deep a dive on. But I know that we're sort of running up against the clock. Jules, just want to ask, if people want to follow what you do and the technologies that you're in, how should they do that?
So you can follow Otoy, my company, on Twitter at Otoy. That's the easiest one to remember. And we also have a very active presence on Facebook under the Octane Render group at otoy.com, at Otoy on Twitter. You can follow me personally at Jules Urbach, but I also do most of the social media management on our Otoy Twitter account. And there's anything that we're doing, all the things that we're doing in the space, especially, it's like if you follow us on Twitter, you'll get all that information. And you can also direct message us and do all that stuff. So happy to interact with anyone interested in this. It's a joy and a pleasure to be in this space and actually see the future happening in real time.
Fantastic to have you on. And just seeing the comment, so many people's minds are blown, and they're saying you need to get Jules and Kyle. So we have David Kyle Johnson, philosopher, on every now and then. Just let you guys go at it, because
I love that. I'd love to come back. This is awesome.
It would be a great conversation. Thank you so much, Jules. Really appreciate it. And with that,
pleasure.
Mission Log Live is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. Technical production on Mission Log Live is by Earl Green. Be sure to visit podcast.roddenberry.com for the latest from the Roddenberry Podcast Network, including not just Mission Log and Mission Log Live, but Women at Warp, Priority One, The Trek Files, your daily Star Trek news, and Shabam. If you'd like to support Mission Log directly, give us a look at patreon.com/missionlog. Thanks to everyone who joined us live or later, and we will talk to you next week.